Olenka, the daughter of Mr. Plemianikov, who used to work in an office, was sitting on the steps behind her house, not doing much. It was hot, flies were bothering her, and she liked the idea that evening would come soon. Dark clouds were gathering in the sky from the east, sometimes bringing a bit of rain. Kukin, who lived in a part of the same house, was in the yard, looking up at the sky. He was the boss of the Tivoli, a theater that's outside. "More rain," he said, feeling hopeless. "Rain every day. It's like it's teasing me. I might as well give up. It's ruining me. I'm losing a lot of money every day." He was upset, and he spoke to Olenka. "Life is so hard, Olga. It makes me want to cry. I work hard, really hard. I worry all the time, can't sleep, trying my best to do everything right. And what happens? I give the audience the best shows, with great actors. But do they appreciate it? No. They want nonsense. And the weather doesn't help. Look, rain almost every evening since May 10th. It's terrible. I can't get many people to come, but I still have to pay rent and the actors." The next day, it looked like rain again, and Kukin laughed crazily. "I don't care anymore. Let the theater drown, let me drown with it. No luck for me. Let the actors sue me and take me to court. Why not even send me to Siberia or to the scaffold?" Ha, ha, ha. The same thing happened the third day. Olenka listened to Kukin seriously, without speaking. Sometimes she felt like crying. Finally, she fell in love with him. He was short, thin, with a yellow face, curly hair, and a high voice. He looked very sad. But Olenka really cared about him. She was always loving someone. She loved her sick father, who sat in his chair all day, breathing heavily. She loved her aunt who visited them sometimes. And when she was in school, she loved her French teacher. She was a kind girl, with a soft way about her. And she looked healthy and nice. People thought she was good, and they smiled at her. And sometimes they would grab her hand and say, "You're wonderful," because they liked her. Her house, which she got from her family, was on the edge of the city, near the Tivoli. From the evening till late at night, she could hear the music from the theater and see the fireworks. She felt like Kukin was fighting with his problems, and her heart went out to him. She didn't want to sleep. When Kukin came home late at night, she would tap on her window, and he would see her face and smile. He asked her to marry him, and they did. When he saw her, he said, "You're wonderful." He was happy, but it rained on their wedding day, and he still looked sad. They worked well together. She worked at the theater, taking care of money and organizing things. Her rosy cheeks and kind smile could be seen at the theater window, behind the scenes, and in the cafe. She started telling her friends that the theater was the best place to have fun and learn things. "But do you think people appreciate it?" she asked. "People just want to see circus acts. Yesterday, we did a show, and hardly anyone came. But if we did something silly, the theater would be full. Tomorrow, we're doing another show. You should come. She repeated whatever Cookin said about the theater and the actors. She also complained about the audience not appreciating art. She got involved in the rehearsals, corrected the actors, and watched the musicians. And when the local paper wrote something bad about the theater, she cried and went to argue with the editor. The actors liked her and called her Vanichka and the darling. She felt sorry for them and sometimes lent them small amounts of money. When they didn't pay her back, she didn't complain to her husband. At most, she shed a few tears. In winter, they worked well together. They rented a theater in town for the whole winter and rented it out to different groups, like a little Russian theater company, a magician, and local amateur actors. Olenka looked happier and fuller, while Cookin looked thinner and sicker, complaining about losing money, even though they did okay in the winter. At night, he coughed, and she gave him medicine and took care of him. "You're my precious," she said, stroking his hair. "You mean a lot to me." During Lent, Cookin went to Moscow for work, and Olenka couldn't sleep without him. She felt like a chicken who can't sleep when the rooster is away. Cookin was delayed in Moscow. He wrote that he'd be back for Easter week and talked about plans for the theater. But one late night, before Easter Monday, there was a scary knock at the gate. It sounded like a drum. Boom, boom, boom. The cook ran to open the gate. "Please open the gate," a deep voice said. "I have a telegram for you." Olenka had gotten telegrams from her husband before, but this time she felt terrified. She opened it with shaking hands and read, "Ivan Petrovich died suddenly today. Waiting for orders for funeral Tuesday." That's how the telegram said it. Funeral. And another word she didn't understand. Propped. It was signed by the manager of the opera company. "My dearest." Olenka cried. "My sweetheart, my love. Why did I ever meet you? Why did I fall in love with you? Who have you left your poor Olenka to?" Cookin was buried on Tuesday at the Vagenkov Cemetery in Moscow. Olenka came home on Wednesday and cried loudly in her bed, so loud that people could hear her in the street and the neighboring yards. "Poor thing," the neighbors said, crossing themselves. "How Olga Semyonovna is grieving." 3 months later, Olenka was coming home from church, feeling sad and wearing black clothes. Beside her was Vasily Pustovalov, the manager of a lumber yard. He looked more like a landowner than a businessman, with his fancy clothes. "Everything happens for a reason, Olga Semyonovna," he said gently. "When someone we love dies, it's because it's God's plan, and we have to accept it." He walked her to her gate, said goodbye, and left. She kept hearing his voice in her head all day, and when she closed her eyes, she saw his dark beard. She really liked him, and it seemed he liked her too, because not long after, a woman she knew a little came to have coffee with her and talked about how good Pustovalov was and how any woman would be lucky to marry him. 3 days later, Pustovalov visited Olenka. He didn't stay long, but Olenka fell in love with him so deeply that she couldn't sleep all night and felt like she had a fever. In the morning, she called the woman over. Soon after, Olenka and Pustovalov got engaged, and then they got married. Pustovalov and Olenka lived happily together. He worked at the lumber yard until dinner, then went out for business. When he wasn't there, Olenka worked in the office, doing paperwork and sending out orders. Lumber prices go up 20% every year now, she told people. We used to get wood from our forests here. Now Vasichka has to go to Mogilev to get wood every year. And the taxes are so high, she said, covering her face in shock. So high. She felt like she'd been in the lumber business forever. She thought the most important thing in life was lumber. There was something sweet about the way she said words like beam, plank, and stave. At night, she dreamed about huge piles of wood and long lines of wagons carrying wood away from the city. She dreamed about a whole army of beams marching upright to fight the lumber yard, knocking into each other with sharp sounds like dry wood cracking. Olenka cried out in her sleep, and Pustovalov comforted her gently. Olenka, my dear, what's wrong? Cross yourself. Her husband's thoughts became hers. If he thought the room was too hot, she thought so too. If he thought business was slow, she thought so too. Pustovalov didn't like going out for fun, so she stayed home on holidays too. You're always at home or in the office, her friends said. Why don't you go to the theater or circus, darling? Vasichka and I don't go to the theater, she replied calmly. We're busy with work. What's the point of going to the theater? On Saturdays, she and Pustovalov went to Vespers, and on holidays, they went to early Mass. When they came home, they walked together, looking happy and smelling nice. At home, they had tea with milk bread and different jams, and then they ate pie. Every day at lunchtime, there was a delicious smell of soup, roast meat, or duck in the yard, and on fasting days, there was the smell of fish. You couldn't walk past without feeling hungry. There was always a pot of tea on the office table, and customers got tea and biscuits. Once a week, they went to the baths and came back with red faces, walking together. We're doing well, thank God, Olenka told her friends. I hope everyone can be as happy as us. When Pustovalov went to Mogilev to buy wood, Olenka missed him terribly. She couldn't sleep and cried at night. Sometimes, a veterinary surgeon named Smirnov, who lived in part of her house, came to see her in the evenings. He told her stories, or they played cards. It distracted her. The most interesting stories were about his own life. He was married and had a son, but he left his wife because she lied to him. Now he sent her money every month for their son. Olenka felt sorry for him. Well, God bless you, she said when he left in the candlelight. Thanks for keeping me company. May God keep you healthy. God bless you. She spoke calmly, like her husband. As the veterinary surgeon went out, She called after him, "Vladimir Platonik, you should make up with your wife. Forgive her, for your son's sake. Children understand everything, you know." When Pustovalov came back, Olenka told him quietly about the veterinary surgeon and his sad family life. They sighed and talked about the boy who must miss his father. Then, they prayed together for children. For 6 years, the Pustovalovs lived happily together, loving each other and getting along well. But one winter, Vasily Andreevich caught a cold after drinking hot tea without a hat on, and he got sick. Even though he had the best doctors, he died after 4 months of being ill. Olenka was a widow again. "Who have you left me, my love?" she cried after the funeral. "How will I live without you? Pity me, good people, pity me. I'm all alone in the world." She wore black clothes and cried a lot. She didn't wear hats or gloves anymore and hardly left the house, except for church and to visit her husband's grave. She lived almost like a nun. It was 6 months before she stopped wearing black and opened her shutters. She started going out in the mornings to the market with her cook. But what she did at home was a mystery. People guessed because they saw her in her garden, having tea with the veterinarian while he read the newspaper to her. Once, she saw someone she knew at the post office and said, "There's not enough veterinary inspection in our town. That's why there's so much sickness. People get sick from the milk and get infections from the horses and cows. We need to take care of animals' health as much as humans." She repeated what the veterinarian said and agreed with him about everything. It was clear she couldn't go a year without someone she cared about, and now she found happiness with the veterinarian. If it were anyone else, people might not approve, but everyone thought well of Olenka. She was so open. She and the veterinarian didn't talk about their new relationship. They tried to keep it secret, but Olenka couldn't keep secrets. When the veterinarian's friends from the regiment visited, she made tea and served dinner and talked to them about diseases in animals. The veterinarian felt embarrassed and told her angrily after they left, "Didn't I ask you not to talk about things you don't understand? When doctors talk, please don't interfere. It's annoying." She looked at him in surprise and fear and asked, "But, Volodika, what should I talk about?" she asked. Then she hugged him, tears in her eyes, and begged him not to be angry. And they were both happy. But their happiness didn't last long. The veterinary surgeon left with his regiment for good when they were moved far away, almost to Siberia, and Olenka was left alone. Now she was completely alone. Her father had been dead for a long time, and his old chair was in the attic, covered in dust and missing a leg. She became thin and plain, and people on the street didn't look at her like they used to. It seemed like her best years were over, and a new uncertain life was starting, which she didn't want to think about. In the evening, Olenka sat on the steps and heard the music and fireworks from the Tivoli, but it didn't excite her anymore. She looked into the yard without feeling anything. When night came, She went to bed and dreamt of nothing but the empty yard. She ate and drank because she had to. But the worst part was, she didn't have any opinions anymore. She saw and understood everything, but she couldn't form opinions about it. She didn't know what to talk about. Not having opinions was terrible. You see a bottle, or you see rain, or you see a man riding in a wagon. But you can't say what they're for or what sense they make. You can't say, not even for 1,000 rubles. When Kukin, Pustovalov, and the veterinary surgeon were around, Olenka had an opinion about everything and would freely share it. But now, there was emptiness in her heart and brain, just like in her yard. It felt as bitter as wormwood. The town grew around her. The gypsy road became a street, and where the Tivoli and lumberyard were, there were now houses and streets. Time passed quickly. Olenka's house looked gloomy, with a rusty roof and a slanted shed. Weeds grew in the yard. Olenka herself aged and became plain. In the summer, she sat on the steps, feeling empty and sad. Sometimes, she remembered things when she smelled spring or heard the church bells, and she felt warm inside and cried. But it only lasted a moment. Then she felt empty again, thinking, what's the point of living? The black kitten Briska rubbed against her, but she didn't care. What she needed was love that would consume her, give her ideas, and warm her old heart. She pushed the kitten away angrily, saying, "Go away. What are you doing here?" So, day after day, year after year, no joy, no opinions. Whatever Marva, the cook, said was fine. One hot July evening, as the town cattle passed by and dust filled the yard, there was a knock at the gate. Olenka opened it and was surprised to see the veterinarian Smirnov. He had gray hair now and was dressed as a civilian. All the memories flooded back, and she couldn't stop crying. She hugged Smirnov without saying a word. They walked into the house and had tea. "My darling," she whispered, trembling with joy. "Vladimir Platonych, where have you come from?" "I want to settle here," he said. "I quit my job and came to try my luck here, and it's time to send my son to school. My wife and I made up." "Where is she?" asked Olenka. "At the hotel with our son. I'm looking for a place to stay." "Take my house," Olenka exclaimed. "Please stay here. I won't ask for any rent. This is such a joy." The next day, they painted the roof and whitewashed the walls. Olenka supervised happily. Her old smile returned. Her whole being felt alive again, like she had woken up from a long sleep. Smirnov's wife and son arrived. She was thin and plain, and the boy Sasha was chubby with blue eyes and dimples. He immediately played with the kitten and laughed. "Is that your cat, Auntie?" he asked Olenka. "When she has kittens, can I have one? My mom is scared of mice." Olenka chatted with him and gave him tea. She felt warmth and love in her heart, as if the boy were her own son. In the evening, as he studied, She looked at him tenderly and whispered to herself, "My darling, my pretty, you're so smart and handsome." An island is a tract of land entirely surrounded by water, he recited. An island is a tract of land, she repeated, with conviction, the first opinion she had formed in years after so much emptiness. Olenka now had her opinions, and she discussed with Sasha's parents at dinner how difficult the schoolwork had become for children at the gymnasium. She believed that a classical education was better than a commercial one because it opened up various career paths. Sasha began attending the gymnasium, but his mother never returned from her visit to her sister in Kharkov. His father was often away inspecting cattle, leaving Sasha feeling abandoned. Feeling sorry for Sasha, Olenka moved him into the wing of the house with her and took care of him. Every morning, she would gently wake him up for school, feeling reluctant to disturb his peaceful sleep. She would remind him to study hard and mind his teachers, even though he was sometimes grumpy in the mornings. Walking behind Sasha to the gymnasium, Olenka would call out to him and slip a date or caramel into his hand before he entered the school. Sasha, feeling embarrassed by his aunt's presence, would ask her to go home. She would watch him until he disappeared into the school, overwhelmed with love for him. Her love for Sasha was deeper than any other bond she had ever experienced. She cared for him selflessly and joyfully, even though he wasn't her own child. She couldn't explain why she felt such intense love for him, but it consumed her completely. After seeing Sasha off to school, Olenka returned home feeling content and filled with love. Her face radiated happiness, and people who met her were pleased to see her. She shared stories about Sasha and his studies with others, repeating his words exactly. At dinner, they discussed Sasha's lessons, and Olenka helped him prepare for school. She prayed for him before bed and dreamed of his future success as a doctor or engineer. Tears of happiness rolled down her cheeks as she thought about his future. One night, there was a loud knock at the gate, startling Olenka awake. She feared it was a telegram from Kharkov, summoning Sasha to his mother. The thought of Sasha leaving filled her with despair. But when she heard the veterinarian's voice, she felt relieved and went back to bed, comforted by the knowledge that Sasha was safe at home.